When we borrow source material, we do two things to credit that source. One, we provide an in-text citation, which includes a signal phrase and a parenthetical citation that lets the reader know the specific page number that the material came from. The other thing that we provide is a list of works cited. What's in the text is a citation. This is a list of all of those works that we referenced or cited in the text of our paper. The Hacker and Summers text provides us general guidelines for a work cited, and we're going to talk about some specifics for those. If you'll notice that they have a directory for listing authors, for dealing with articles in periodicals, print books, online sources, audiovisual sources, and other sources. Now we're going to limit our research to library databases. So we do need to know about library databases, but we also need to be able to provide the information necessary at the front of the citation. We'll talk about those specifics, but I want to show you some examples and show you how you use the Hacker and Summers text in order to create your citations. First of all, let's look at the example on the right. Notice that this is the beginning of the page, a work cited. The author's name is in the header and the page is numbered as it was as in sequence. This is not a separate document, but part of the document that is being submitted, that is a documented paper. In order to do this, we can use the insert page break command in order to start a new page. So that's how we start a new page for the work cited. Then I want you to notice the other formatting. Notice if I go here and I choose paragraph, that it shows me that under indentation I have chosen hanging. That means that after the first line, the other lines of text will be indented. Notice that my spacing is double spaced and that the spacing before and after is set at 0. So these things don't change. The only thing that changes is that now we have a hanging indent. So let's look at this specific one. Notice that the sources are listed in alphabetical order. It doesn't matter what order they're cited in your paper, you list them alphabetically. I'm going to point out a few things. One, authors' names are in inverse order. That means it is last name, comma, first name, followed by a period. If there is more than one author, the other authors' names are in normal order. If I cite the Hacker and Summers text, it would be Hacker, comma, Diane, and Nancy Summers. If it is an article in a journal or a magazine or a newspaper, I have the author's name, title of the article, the name of the publication. This first citation is for an article in a journal, so I have a volume and an issue number. I have the year that it was published, and then I have the page numbers. This particular text came from a database, the Academic Search Premier. You may use italics or underlining, but I underlined here so that it was easier to see the distinction. Because it was an online source, I tell that my medium is the web, and then the date is the date that the source was accessed online. If you're doing research over a few days, you may use the same date. However, the intention is so that your reader knows when this was located in this online form, because it may no longer be accessible later on. The same thing is true for the second source. It comes from a database. In this case, it comes from something that is not, the UNESCO Courier is a periodical that is not a journal, so I have only the date and then the page numbers. The third comes from a newspaper, and because we don't know what daily telegraph that would be, we provide the city and the state. And in this case, the city and the country, because it is in the United Kingdom. Notice that dates come day, month, abbreviated, and year. Again, the database. Our medium is the web. The next source was a book, or is a book, but it came from Google Books, so it did come from a website. If it is a print source that you have access to on the web, then that is a legitimate source. The next one comes from, in this case, a web page, but it was an online newspaper. The next one is a print book. So I have the author's name, the name of the text. In this case, it is not the first edition, just like your textbooks are not the first edition. It is a print source. And then finally, I had a review of a text, so I used that particular format for the last one. Now let's look at the rules that were applied to create this particular works cited. Notice that your textbook distinguishes among types of authors. A single author, 2 or 3, 4 or more, when we get to use et al. An organization, when we don't know who the author is, and if we have more than one work by the same author. Let's look at the rules. The single author is author's name last and then first. If we have 2 or 3 authors, we put the first author's name in inverse order, last name first, and then we put the other authors' names in normal order. If there are 4 or more, we can give the names of all, or we may use the Latin et al. Standing for others. Notice that there is a period. It is not italicized, even though it is a Latin phrase. If we have an organization as an author, then that name is listed in place of an individual's name. And if the author is unknown, we begin with the title of the article. Next, let's look at the rules for articles in periodicals in print. Now you notice here that we have databases. Up to this point in the citation, we are citing a source, and then we provide the information relative to the database. So we need to know the rule for the citation to begin with. For articles in periodicals, they can be in journals, monthly or weekly magazines, daily newspapers. We will not be using abstracts of articles, but you do need to be aware of the fact that articles can be cited in a variety of ways. Let's look at the rules. If we have an article in a journal, a scholarly source, then we're going to have author, title of the article in quotation marks, the name of the journal, the volume and issue number, the year of publication, the pages, and the medium. Again, if it is a database, this will change. But notice here there is a period. In this case, it ends with a question mark. There is no mark of punctuation. There is no mark of punctuation. The parenthesis is followed by a colon. The page numbers are followed by a period. Notice that that is consistent. Be certain that you're aware of where these marks of punctuation go. For a monthly or weekly magazine, author's name, title of the article. When there is no question mark, it ends with a period. The title of the magazine, the date, month and year, the page numbers, which come after a colon, a period. If it is a weekly magazine, everything is the same except you include the day before the month. Notice that you still have the same abbreviations, the same colon, the same periods. If it is a daily newspaper, the same information is provided. The only thing we add is that bracketed city if we're uncertain. We tell the name of the edition if it is necessary, if it is specified, a page number, and the medium for the text, whether it is print or from a database. Now we just looked at how we cite articles that are print. When we cite articles from a database, we provide the same kind of information up to the point that we reach the medium. If it is print, the word print comes after the pages. If it is something we find in a database, the name of the database comes next. It is either italicized or underlined. And then we say that it came from the web, and we give the date of access, day, month, year. Notice that everything else is the same. You can do the same thing with a book that you find online. You may say that it comes from the web and the place. Make sure that you make that distinction. But notice that for articles in a database, the same things are true for the original citation up to the point that you go to the page numbers. Then instead of print, you give the name of the database, the fact that it comes from the web, and the date you accessed that information. If you use books, they may be print or they may be online, but you have a basic format for a book, and then there are a number of variations. The book may have an editor and an author. There may be a translator. The book may simply have an editor. You may have a graphic or illustrated book. There may be an entire anthology, as with the 102 text. You may be choosing a selection from that anthology, an edition other than the first, as with your textbooks, an encyclopedia, a sacred text such as the Bible or the Quran. Whether we are accessing just a portion of the book and looking at the publisher's imprint. So let's look at the rules. The basic format for a book, author's last name, first name. Same rules apply if there's more than one author. The title of the book, which is either underlined or italicized. The city of publication, the publisher, which can be reduced to one name, one word, the date, and the medium. Again, if you are finding the text online, you say that it's from the web and you provide that information. Notice that you find the city of publication and the publisher on the copyright page, the title page and the copyright page. If you have the book online, that information will be available, but you may have to look for it. It tells you that you get to use the copyright, that you get to use the abbreviated version of the publisher's name. If you're looking at city of publication, it should be the first one listed, or you can choose the one closest to you. The date is the most recent one. If there is both an author and an editor, this is the format. If there is a translator, this is the format. If you have a book with an editor, then you give the editor's names first, as with the 102 text, which has editors because it is an anthology. For the entire anthology, which is a collection of works on a common theme, you have authors' names, editors, title of the text, place of publication, publisher, and there should be a date, and the date. If it is print, you provide that information. That is the medium. If you are using more than one selection from the anthology, then you would choose the author of the selection, the short story or the text that you're specifically addressing, the title of it, the name of the anthology, and then you say that the editors are, and finally you follow with the publication information and the page numbers of the selection. For an edition other than the first, such as your textbook, that comes after the title. If you have an encyclopedia or a dictionary, if it is signed, you begin with the author's name. If not, you begin with the title of the article. If you have a sacred text, then there is a particular format. You use the title of the sacred text as it appears on the title page, the editor or translator's name, if there is any, publication information, and whether it is print. Add the name of the version if you have a different version, like the NIV or the King James Version of the Bible. For other online sources, which you may use only with specific permission on a case-by-case basis, if there is a website, the title of the website is italicized or underlined. You provide information as to the sponsor of the website, when it was last updated, the medium, and the date of access. If there is an organization that is the author, then you provide the same information. If there is no author, then you give the title of the website. Notice in each case you give the sponsor of the site in addition to the title and the author. You can see that the list is fairly extensive. What the list provides us is different situations in which we look to see how we are to format it. But that way, as a reader, if we know that the citations are in MLA format, we know where to look for what information. You do not have to provide the URL. That's something that has been left behind, fortunately. But notice that it also provides information about advertisements, works of art, if you have a lecture or public address, television or radio programs and interviews, computer software, DVDs, film, sound, music, podcast. There are rules which provide us with a format, tells us what information we are to provide in what order. But as a general rule, the information we provide is the author's name, the title of the text, names of databases, publication information, authors, and sponsoring sources. So all of these allow us to credit our source so that our reader can access the information if they choose, and so that we are crediting the original, giving them, acknowledging the fact that they have contributed to what we are presenting in an argument or in an informational paper. Now, the last thing I want you to look at is sort of what all this information looked like before we set it up and made the work cited. All of this information comes from the library databases. And when we look at the library databases, I'm going to show you a couple of tricks that you can use, because sometimes the information that's provided is something that you have to sort through. There's our book, the title of the article, the title of the book, but notice everything's not capitalized. Notice that they have the author's name after the word by, and it's in regular order. We have to put these things in correct form. And if you know the rules, then you also know whether a citation is formatted correctly or not. And that is your responsibility. So always go back to the Hacker text to double check. Since you know basically what to look for, as you're doing research, make sure you make notes about these pieces of information. And even though you don't have to have the URL, I always recommend that you copy and paste that into your notes so that you can go back to that source. But if you have all the bibliographical citation information, you should be able to go back to the source with a fair degree of ease. But notice that when we get the information in raw form, we have to sort through it. But when it is in the format that is asked for in the work cited, then we can look at it and see what's there easily, and we understand that marks of punctuation and order are important.